My name is Meshkov. I'm software engineer at Brex, and today we're co-presenting with Matthew Orford. We both work on the data and AI problems at Brex. Today we're going to give you a talk on how Brex built AI native financial reporting on Cube's semantic layer and our journey from open source to production. To start the talk, let me introduce what Brex is. Brex is the intelligent finance platform with corporate cards, spend management software, and banking, all in one place. We work with founders, CFOs, and finance teams across 35,000 plus companies, ranging from startups to the world's largest enterprises. Let's dive in on the talk. The agenda for this talk is the following. We're going to first describe the problem, what finance teams facing in the wild. We're going to talk about our solution to this problem called Brex Spaces, an AI financial analyst. We're going to skim over the architecture and how we built it. And we will finish with the evaluation strategy so that we know that the solution works. Let me start by the following quote. We believe that the future of financial reporting is not the chart. Let me unpack what I mean by that. Generally, business users like CFOs, they already know there is a problem, but they want to understand what's happening, why we have a problem. Consider an example. We have a question. Why is marketing 23% over a budget? When they ask this question, they generally wait for a couple of days to understand why this is happening. A traditional data team workflow looks the following. The ticket filed in the Slack queue, and then analyst picks up the ticket working on the SQL representation, on the data formatting, and so on and so forth. And then the result is presented in the form of a dashboard. All of that take about 2 days. There is a clear bottleneck in the insight production here. The dashboards are fixed, but finance is not. What dashboards do, it's answer verified questions, it show data passively, it requires humans to spot anomalies looking at the charts, and it's breaking on the net new questions. What finance actually need, it's answer any question almost instantaneously. They would like to see the proactive anomaly flagging. They want to see the context and historical comparison. And they would like to ask a follow-up question in the form of conversational refinement. We built Brex Spaces to address all of these problems. It's a new product, an AI-embedded financial analyst. The system doesn't just surface data. It interprets it. It answers why, not just what. The workflow for the tool is the following. The user asks a question in a natural language. The system produces the insight, anomalies flagged, context added, comparison also surfaced. And then the user can refine it in the conversational interface. We're going to show you a quick demo of the product, right? This was a demo of the product and how it works. The user asks ask a question about the top spending vendors on Brex platform, and then we surface the insight and the supporting chart that allows you to analyze the data deeply and get the contextual information about why it's happening. Let me dive deep into the architecture and what are the major components of the solution that we built. There are 3 major layers that power our AI solution. Each layer makes the system more reliable and grounding in actual business meaning. The first and foremost is the semantic layer. Cube semantic layer models translate raw database columns into business concepts. The AI knows what's the meaning of the team, budget, period, or expense. The second important layer is the certified queries. It's pre-validated SQL patterns approved by analysts. The LLM derives answer from the gold standard logic, not its own imagination. We know LLM can make up things. And the last but not least, it's the prompt engineering, the prompt that shapes the agent behavior. It can flag anomalies, add historical context, and generate insights rather than just column descriptions. The sequence of how you build such solution matters a lot. We believe that the knowledge layer should always come first, with UI as a second degree artifact. So when we designed Spaces, we focused on the ontology. We designed the semantic model before writing any single line of a UI code, focusing on what is the right representation for each business entity in our universe. Then we built a couple of internal prototypes where we tried different UI approaches and validated it cross-functionally with the team of finance, accounting, and other business users. And then we rebuilt it for broad to make all of these insights at scale. So the key insight here that the business meaning comes first in such systems. So without semantic layer, LLMs are guessing. They don't know the schema very well, and they can make mistakes. With Cube, all of the answers from AI is grounded in ontology. So there is no confusion about what marketing budget is. The LLM is commodity, but the context is defensible. GPT, Claude, Gemini are all interchangeable. Any model can answer questions. Calling an LLM API is not a moat anymore. What is defensible, though, is the solid semantic model that encodes proprietary business ontology. We built it on Cube. Certified queries, it's analyst-approved growing library of the predefined SQL patterns. Keep your AI truthful. And the domain expertise, it encodes the rules over the time in the prompt, and it's a compounding advantage for the solutions like Spaces. With that, I'm passing word to Matthew. He will dive deep into the technical details, how we built it.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, I'll be kind of walking us through what our architecture looked like and kind of how we've ended up building Spaces more on the technical side. So first, I'll kind of start with like where we started. In the early days of kind of exploring what it would look like to introduce a semantic layer at Brex, we stood up like a self-hosted version of Cube's open source software, Cube Core. And we had that deployment live. We were kind of messing around with some of the APIs, trying to use it for some of our dashboarding, et cetera. We realized that, the context that it was providing could be really useful for agents. And so we ended up building a pretty lightweight MCP wrapper. It had two tools, one to describe the data and basically get the metadata, and then one to actually fire off queries. And we stood up an in-house agent, pretty simple scaffolding. And we kind of felt like this was going to be, pretty satisfactory for what we were trying to do. And we had this for a while. It's definitely a pretty simple flow based on kind of this diagram that I have here, but obviously the devil's in the details. And as we started to kind of go through the process Dan mentioned and roll this out, especially when we got to the productionizing point, this ended up becoming quite complicated to support. So there were kind of three main reasons that we decided to move from this kind of open source model that we had and self-hosted model we had to Cube Cloud. And those three reasons are listed here. The first was there's a lot of overhead, as you all can imagine, for maintaining the infrastructure, both on the agent side and on the Cube side. Every deployment that we made for Cube, we had to set up blue-green deployments to make sure that we were ensuring reliability, availability, scalability, all of the above. And that alone was quite a bit of work for our team. It required a lot more hands-on call and all of that. Also on the agent side, there was obviously a lot of work. It's easy to say a simple MCP wrapper, but the actual tool orchestration, the loop orchestration, context management, et cetera, it was quite a bit of work to sort all of that out. And definitely the biggest thing, which is the second detail here, is the prompt engineering that we had to do for our agent. So at our peak, before we switched over to the cloud model, we had 4 prompt files, over 3,000 lines of code, 3,000 lines of prompts, felt like it was growing exponentially. These things included references to our schema, guides on how to use both semantic SQL, which is Cube's in-house SQL dialect, and the charting library that we were using. It'd have examples of using both of those, examples of what our finance leaders might want to see, and on top of all of that, our actual agent prompt for the stuff that we cared about in terms of, persona, etc. So it ended up, growing quite a bit, became kind of this treadmill of continuing to add more and more to our prompts. And it kind of felt like we were just, exponentially growing, a lot of maintenance for just keeping these things. Every time we introduced something new, something else broke. So became very sensitive. And the third reason that we decided to switch was probably the easiest one. And it was that we ended up setting up a pretty comprehensive suite of evals that I'll jump into a little bit later. And we ran them on both our in-house agent and once we had access to Cube's cloud agent. And we noticed a pretty big discrepancy in the results. Cube's agent was proved better on everything from data consistency, tool usage, and just general answer quality. It lost on every metric. So it made the decision very easy that we should shift over and leverage Cube's cloud agent. So once we moved over to Cube's agentic analytics platform and used that to back our product, we ended up with this split. We had Cube owning everything that I kind of said, and Dan described as table stakes. The agent itself, its loop and tool orchestration, the tooling itself, whether it was from the actual querying all the way to the schema discovery and enum discovery, and also the chart generation. And that allowed us on the Brex side to focus on kind of the moat that Dan described, that ontology, our data quality, security aspects that are inherent to us, smaller, the rule set that actually applied to how we wanted our agent to respond, our eval system, which I'll describe later, and just basic UX and product functionality. But definitely the biggest win here was, as I mentioned, eliminating the prompt engineering. And as you can see kind of from this graphic, we went from that huge bulk of 4 files, 3,000 lines of prompts, to a simple set of 10 rules for our agent. And as you can see from kind of the item on the right here, those rules that we described are significantly more unique to Brex. They're not the table stakes that you would need to figure out how to run SQL, stuff like that, that should just be out of the box. It was a lot more focused on exactly how we want our agent to communicate, how we want it to respond, the structure of its responses, and standards for how we want things to be formatted and how our finance leaders would like filtering, sorting, et cetera, done. Kind of the pieces that we know as a finance company and can implement ourselves. So once we get rid of all of this prompt engineering, the big focus for us came back to the eval system. As you all can imagine, the semantic layer and data in general is ever-changing, and it makes it significantly more ever-changing when you introduce an agent on top. You kind of have 2 different sets. You have changes to the data, which are all things that we're familiar with. New vendors being introduced, new customers, categories, changes in upstream tables, etc. The values that you're getting differ from reasons that you're not even aware of. And as things change over time, that data is always shifting. You also have agent changes. One of the benefits of getting all of this infrastructure in Cube's hands is that we don't have to worry about it. But one of the drawbacks of that is that we don't have as much visibility into the infrastructure. The same is true just with model providers. Whether you're using Claude, GPT, Gemini, you don't have control over changes to those models. And especially if you want to do upgrades on those models, things can change anytime. So you also need a way to get insight into making sure that those changes aren't impacting your downstream system. And that also applies to prompt engineering that you're doing yourself. But as you can imagine, none of this is deterministic. These things are a lot more shifty than traditional code systems. And so you need something beyond traditional unit tests. That's why eval systems are where we ended up focusing a lot of our energy. So our eval system that we have in product now kind of has 2 tiers. The first one is our set of online evaluators. These are really lightweight evaluators. Most of them are deterministic code-based evaluators rather than LLM judges that we've used our production feedback loop to inform and build. So to kind of walk you through what these look like, I'll give a couple of examples. We have first this idea of a my spend bug. This is something we noticed in production. A lot of the Spaces users are admins of their accounts. So when they say my travel spend, for example, it's hard for our agent to understand, are they asking for their personal travel spend or are they asking for their account's travel spend? As you can imagine, if you're looking for my travel spend and you get a response back telling you 272,000, that's going to be a lot higher than you expected. And so we're probably looking for just the travel spend for that person's account or that person's user itself. So we ended up introducing an evaluator that basically looks at first person language. And if it has that, make sure that it's at least asking for clarification or applying a user level filter. The second one that we had was a silent filter bug. This is actually something that we introduced in our rule engineering. And we thought, in the vast majority of cases, our users would want to see mostly approved expenses. When we were doing some internal testing, that seemed to be the case. And so we introduced a rule that told our agent, make sure you're always filtering to approved. Quickly, when we released this to production, we realized people were using Spaces for far beyond just analyzing approved expenses. They wanted to see the entire suite. So we needed to find a way to, one, remove that rule, and then two, set up an evaluator and make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. Three, we have the enum discovery bug. So the example that we had was a user was asking for commuter benefit cards to see how many they had, who was using them, etc. And basically what we ended up seeing was that our agent at times was doing like statements to try and figure out what commuter benefits cards were. But that wasn't the case. For this specific value, it should have been looking for things like just the word commuter. So we ended up, as I mentioned before, Cube has a search dimension values tool. We ended up writing an evaluator to make sure that that tool was always being called before any like filter was being applied. And we ended up using that more or less to figure out that this wasn't happening again and make our results much more consistent. The second tier is offline evals. This is where we start to introduce more LLM as judges. And it's also run, rather than on production samples, it's run offline on basically replays of our agent's runs. So what we had here is we basically broke it down into 5 different categories that we cared about. It was answer quality, which is just generic, how well is the answer formatted, etc. The second one is chart type appropriateness, which is actually surprisingly good out of the box, but basically how well does the Cube agent actually get the correct charts for our users. 3 was data consistency, making sure that the tool response data was actually the same data reflected in our responses from the agent. 4 was insight relevance. The insights being pulled from this data were actually relevant to what the user was looking for. And 5, how well was it leveraging the semantic layer and running SQL to query it. So as you can see here, over time, we ran these on a loop kind of as we were iterating. And it allowed us to basically continue to iterate on our agent, introduce more rules, give it more examples of exactly what it should be doing in certain cases, et cetera. And kind of as you can see here, we did introduce a regression at times, but having these in place allowed us to continue iteration and actually end up significantly higher. If you look at insight relevance, for example, at first it was giving great insights, but they were completely irrelevant to what the user was looking at. And over time, we were able to raise that score from the high 50s all the way above 80 and close to 90%, which made our production release significantly more stable. So that is kind of what our eval suite looks like. And to wrap it up, we give a couple of key takeaways, going all the way back to what Dan was talking about. First, dashboards to answers. Dashboards are answering questions that you think you're going to have, but AI agents, especially when implemented correctly, allow you to answer any question that you actually do have in real time. Secondly, semantic layer is your foundation, and you should always build it before your UX. Making sure that the ontology that you have in place is correct makes your product, that's whether or not your product is good. Third, especially in a place like finance, trust for your users and trust in their data is crucial. And having a way to certify queries and make sure that the same queries return the same examples every single time is crucial. And having that mechanism for certifying queries is huge. 4 is in order to ensure that your agent's performing over time, you should have a set of evals and you should be putting a lot of thought into exactly how your evals are making sure that your continuous iteration is always causing improvements and avoiding regressions. And 5, our overall takeaway from this entire project has been that the context is the product. Everything that you talk about in your semantic layer, that is the most important part. That's where you should be focusing all of your energy. And if you need to leverage other infrastructure to make sure that that's where your focus is going, then that's what you should be doing. So I'll hand it back to Dan to kind of wrap a couple of things up, and then I think we have some time for Q&A.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, so that's our take on AI agents and the semantic layers. Thanks a lot, Cube team.